folks. Welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live. Download our free app and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. Can't thank you enough for making us part of your day today. And as I traverse the musical landscape, it's always beautiful to connect with cats who can stretch the lineage of music and therefore unlock the ears of younger generations' understanding of how real music and melodic improvisation is made. And without further ado, I want to bring in a cat who has had a decorated career that is still going, but he definitely he came of age during the highs of the studio scene of the 1970s, where he was able to develop his own individual sound and create an individual person for himself so that society knew who he was. Richard T. Bear, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
It's good to be here, Jake. Hello to your listeners. I hope everybody's having a good day today. And
I wanted, yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just kind of wanted to know if you got your start on the bandstand on the Chitlin circuit.
It's very interesting that you say that. It was the way I got my start is basically in a music store in Manhattan. And I went down there to get a keyboard, to buy a keyboard. And
what year was this?
I was God only knows. I was, let's see, 62, 60, about 65.
Okay, so
1965.
Unbelievable. Okay, so you went go ahead, continue.
I think I was turning 13, and I went down there and got a keyboard. It was a place called Manny's Music. And I was so amazed at all the musicians and the vibe and the whole sense of what was going on in that place, that anytime I went to the city, I grew up outside the city in those years in a city called Yonkers. And next door to my house was a very famous musician from the modern jazz quartet called Milt Jackson. He lived there, so I would hear him.
You got to be kidding! Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
No.
I mean, I've interviewed. I interviewed Don Preston, who played with Frank Zappa, but that dude used to play with Ollie Jackson in Detroit with Elvin Jones, who was Milt's brother. And I've interviewed Dick Burke, who played drums, Monty Alexander, who played with Milt. Milt was Bobby Hutcherson. Yeah. Milt was Bobby Hutcherson's hero. And this guy was playing these vibes, and you were hearing it whistling through your window.
I was hearing it right next door. Yeah, right next door.
In Yonkers. I'm a Stony Brook cat. I'm a Stony Brook cat, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so music started becoming a big part of my life. I'll be kind of honest with you. I had kind of an alcoholic father, and I grew up in a household that was abusive, and I chose music as a way to for me to bail into something else, not the reality of the way I was living. And as I got older, 15, 16, I used to take the train into the city, and I'd go hang out at Manny's Music. And one day I asked Henry, who ran the place, I said, "Henry, can I work here?" And he said, "Yeah, sure. We could use a kid like you." So I started going into the city every day. I got my driver's license, drove down there, hung out in there, and would meet the bands that were coming through. Everyone at the time that went through there in the late 60s into 70 was an amazing musician. And I remember one day a bunch of guys came in and they were playing down at the Fillmore East. And it turns out it was some guys from the Grateful Dead, and I got a pass, and they brought me down there, and we all hung out. And I was like this funny kid. I didn't have a clue on the hierarchy and how you were supposed to be.
Right.
You know,
Oh,
I
this
was
is
just
epically
totally
classic. This is unbelievable.
Yeah. I don't know what the word is, but you know, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, and.
But I think that was part of the
just-
appeal. You weren't following the rule book. You know, you didn't know any better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I didn't know how I was supposed to act. Anyway, I go down to the Fillmore East, and the reason I'm telling you this story is because it's pretty an amazing one. And I'm down there, and I get a backstage pass. This is what I want to say. And I'm standing in the wings, and the Dead are playing, and it's a big jam night. It was an off night. They just decided to have a big jam down there, and it was the Dead, and Traffic, and Hot Tuna. And Hot Tuna was an offshoot, for your listeners, of Jefferson Airplane. And Traffic, of course, is Stevie Winwood and all those great cats.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so there's this big jam going on. And so Jerry Garcia looks at me, and there's a Wurlitzer on stage, and he looks at me and points at one of his roadies, and he says, you know, like, bring the kid over, let him play on the Wurlitzer. So I go out there. I think I'm 16 at the time.
Wow.
And I sit down, and I'm playing at the Fillmore East with the Dead and all the rest of these cats. And, you know, I don't know what I played. I don't know how I played. But this transported me into, like, another dimension.
Are there, just real quick, I know it was a jam night, but are there tapes circulating of this?
I have no idea.
Okay, so first of all, Jefferson Airplane was definitely broken up at that point. You're saying Hot Tuna was
Yeah, it was Hot Tuna.
It was Hot Tuna, so it was Yorma, Jack Cassidy,
Right.
Billy,
Will Scarlett.
Will Scarlett on harp,
Papa John Creech.
Wow, and then the Dead at that point were only using one drummer at that point. Billy was just the only drummer, or was Mickey still in the band? Because he got kicked out for a minute.
Well, I remember it was a night, and Pigpen wasn't there.
Yep.
Their keyboard player.
Sure. Yeah.
Sick
Yeah.
or something. Yeah. I think there were two drum sets up, if I recall.
And that I just want to get back to this though. Garcia said he called your name, he called your number. You got the Wurlitzer up there because Pig wasn't there. There was no keyboard player.
No, there was just a Wurlitzer on the side of the stage, kind of near him, and I just sat down to play. And I started playing. I didn't know what the fuck I was playing. Oops, excuse me.
That's all right. That's all right. No problem.
but I played. And it was from that moment on that I knew this is what I wanted to be. So
wow.
I move into the city, and I wind up dating a girl, a lot older than me, one of those things. I think I'm 17 or 18 now. Move into the city. I no longer work at Manny's Music. And I live next door to a guy called King Curtis now.
Absolutely. Wow. How do you wind up living there? I mean, King Curtis, dude, that guy was with Chuck Rainey, and Chuck Rainey was with him.
Yeah, King Curtis and the Kingpins. He was the musical director at the Apollo when Buddy Holly got the wrong booking, and he calmed everybody down for Buddy to play.
Right. Okay, so you live next to King Curtis.
I live next to King Curtis.
Classic.
King Curtis likes me. I'm this like kid, and he takes me up to a couple of gigs with him, and I meet Cornell Dupree and all the people in this band, and I want to be a black musician.
Right, you went from psychedelic hippie, then you went into the gut buck soul and
right.
But that I mean, Curtis was doing the Chitlin circuit. I mean, this is before earlier.
This is the circuit, and these are the clubs, like a place called McKell's up in New York.
Oh yeah.
And things like that. And those are the places I would hang out in. I wouldn't hang out in all the the little hip clubs downtown, I would hang out uptown. When people went to the Village, I went up to Harlem.
Were you going to Minton's and Small's Pet? Were those places still open at
All
that?
all those clubs. And then at that point, I started hanging out on the East Side at a club called Dr. Generosity's, where I met Richie Havens. And Richie Havens liked the way I played, and he said to me, "Okay, I'm recording tonight." He had just done Mixed Bag 1. He had done, Woodstock. And he said, "You're going to come and play on my record." And I showed up there under my real name. I wasn't Richard T. Bear yet. I was Richard Gerstein. And I show up there, and I'm sitting next to Bernard Purdie and all these, amazing session players.
Wow.
And I start to play on a track. I didn't even, I was very, very nervous. I think I might have gone up into the bathroom and thrown up because this was like one of my first sessions.
Oh.
And from that moment on, Richie Havens said, "Hey, you're really, really fun. You're really good. I like where you put it in the pocket. You come play live with us. We're doing the Schaefer Music Festival." So I went to the Central Park, I think a few days later, played with them on stage. And from then on, it was on. I put a band together. I played all over town.
Who was it? Who was in that band? What was the name of the band? Who was in that first band?
The band that I put together?
Yeah.
The band I put together was called the Phantom Band.
The Phantom Band.
We called it the Phantom Band because you never knew who was going to show up in the band. But I'll tell you, a couple of the guys from the Letterman Band were playing in it. Will Lee would play. Sid McGuinness would play. People like that. It was a fun band. It was a couple of people that were on Broadway in a chorus line. Those are the girls that would sing background, and on and on and on. And it was then that I started to think about being a solo artist, and I wanted to get a record deal. Started writing songs, and I ended up being signed by RCA, and I think it was late '77. I had become really good friends with the management guys for Kiss. I started ghostwriting and playing on some of their things, some of their bands. Billy Squier and I started getting together and writing and playing, and I met Gene Simmons and Cher. I started writing for her records, on and on and on, and got a solo album deal. Put out a few on RCA, and then just toured nonstop. Had a kind of a dance hit record called Sunshine Hotel.
Right.
That went into the disco dance charts. It was top 5 in the world, and then went over to Europe and found out that I didn't have to be an opening act anymore, because I was opening for the Doobies and I was opening for Jay Giles a lot and touring all over the place. And then when I went to Europe, they thought the record had merit and stood on its own, and I was headlining over there. So I spent a lot of time in Germany and a lot of time in the countries over there.
Did you? Can I ask you, when you were doing songwriting for Kiss and for Cher, can you talk about the keys to the beginning, having a beginning, middle, and end, and the hook in the song? Because a lot of younger, I'm 39, but sometimes you go see shows today, and younger cats, I'm talking about, this is more about instrumental, not necessarily vocals, but the instrumental,
right.
But the vocals too. They crank it up to 10 to start, and they never take it down from 10. It's there the whole time.
Right. Well, there's not a lot of.
You know what it is? Dynamics. It's dynamics.
How did you learn dynamics?
How did you learn? How did you learn dynamics?
How did I learn dynamics as a studio musician? I really went to work at the time when I was young at jingle houses where I would write jingles or play on jingles, and they'd set up 3 or 4 jingles in a session for the morning, and they were all clients and the agencies. You'd have Jell-O, you'd have Kawasaki, and you'd have Amstel beer, and then or Miller beer, and you'd have all kinds of different things, and you'd have to play them. And I learned the dynamics playing jingles and writing jingles, because I knew you had to have the story told in 30 seconds, and you didn't have a lot of time to just lay out and play. When you go into a club or you're playing in concert, there's plenty of time to lay out and play. The dynamics of songwriting are such that you need to have some sort of a musical hook that starts the song that you can later introduce in the song again. I'm talking about a musical hook. And then lyrically tell the story, say what it's about in the hook, have a solo. And I'm a big proponent of, in songwriting, of having bridges, or something that can take the listener from the story away a little bit, let them dream a little bit, and bring it back into the story. When I hear people now, they're fixated on repetitive repetition, and there are some good songs. I mean, but it's all simplistic. It's not, there's no craft involved, and that's I think because of the way electronic music is right now. I mean, you can anybody can push a key, get a beat, and then try to build on that.
Well, that was my point. Is that that's what I was trying to get at. Is the idea when I interviewed Rick Marotta, he said, in whenever the drum machine came in, you go back to you live next to Milt Jackson, but I've interviewed Mickey Roker and Joe Chambers and cats like Tony Williams.
Sure.
All the funk, the San Francisco cats, Shreve, Garibaldi.
Well, I knew the Marotta brothers very well.
Okay, so my point is that Marotta was like, first of all, Marotta was a dancer. He didn't pick up the drumsticks till he was 19 years old. But what he said was, once the machine came out, younger drummers started to copy a machine. So you all of a sudden lost that individual touch. When I interviewed Bill Cosby, he said you could put a blindfold on him and you could put on any Blue Note record. You could tell right away who the drummer was. So
right.
the idea here is like, when you start to copy a machine, you're going to lose any kind of individual authenticity. So did you
like the bumper sticker says, drum machine. Oh, and that's I actually saw that bumper sticker again yesterday on a car.
What is it? I'm sorry, you cut out there. What does it say?
Drum machines have no soul.
There you go. Like Tony Brownnagel, he said it doesn't come. It doesn't come from your hands and your shoulders and your arms. It comes from your heart. The pulse comes from your heart. So is that part of it too? Is it just that obviously the tools are there, but it's also about humanity.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you bring Tony up because he and I, right now, have spent the last over a year, working on my next solo album.
Get out of here.
Together.
Get out of here.
No. Yeah,
he's a serious.
He's the producer,
dude. A gut bucket, bad boy. He's writing that book on shuffle drumming too. But anyway, I can't wait for that to come. So is this the album you're talking about with him? It's with Tony.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Let me give you a short list of who's on this.
Yeah.
So the basses: Bob Glaub, Hutch Hutcherson, Will Lee, Reggie McBride.
Uh-huh.
Drums: Tony Bronicle and Denny Sywell. Guitars, Walter Trout, Lawrence Juber, Doug Pettibone, Josh Sklar. Keyboards, Mike Finnegan, Bentmont Tench. Percussion, Lenny Castro. Horns, Lee Thornburg, Mark Pender, Joe Sublette. I mean, these are all.
Well, Finnegan's been a lifelong fan of the Jake Feinberg Show. I can't believe. I mean, that is I mean, so let's just talk about that. Is it your belief that everybody should be hitting in the studio at the same time?
Yes.
Explain to the audience
we
why.
Go in. Yeah. We're recording over at Robbie Krieger, who is the guitar player in the Doors. We're recording at his studio, and it's a beautiful studio in Glendale, where you can, go in there with as many players as you want, have everything isolated, and everything's real authentic. There's lots of tubes in the amps, and it's real old school.
I've been looking for Krieger for years, man. Densmore, dude, Robbie Krieger. So it's a great. But explain about the idea. I mean, there's so much going on now with younger peeps, just in general. They're emailing a guitar solo that they can overdub into the track, and what is it about the?
Well, in a way that's pretty amazing too, because you can, like I could send a file to Elliot Randall in London, and have Elliot play on something.
Well, dude, Elliot.
I think of
yeah.
I mean,
Elliot
was also in a rhythm section that I was in. So, we were.
What? I mean, I interviewed Elliot. What was this? Was Randall's Island? What rhythm section was this?
This was right after Randall's Island. This was.
Oh my gosh.
Alan Schwartzberg.
Oh, he's a dear friend. I just had Italian food with him and Bob Mann a couple. Dude, we're
Neil Jason.
Neil Jason,
and
Schwartzberg, and Randall, and Richard T. Bear.
Yeah, we had a rhythm section, and we'd go and play on people's records.
That is. What did you have? What were you called? You weren't called the Wrecking Crew. What was the name of your?
No, we didn't even have a name. We'd go out and play.
Oh, that's so funny. But when you get comfortable with the human, I think that's also the issue, man. I also look at people with I always talk to the cats about inner time, how they develop their time feel. And when you're on the bandstand with a human being, they're all different. They all have different time feels. So you have to adapt to that and really gain your own, sort of not rely on the. I'll never forget Julian Priester told me when he was playing with Sun Ra, Sun Ra would just point to him to play a solo, but really everybody had to have their own. Everyone had to keep time on their own and not rely on the rhythm section to keep time. So you really needed to have your own internal time feel. And that came from the fact that you were always playing with different peeps, real human people. And that's sort of the issue. To me, it's like when you strip away all that individuality and everything becomes formulaic and you can't tell the difference between one and the other, it just doesn't bode well for. And then obviously the saturation of material on YouTube now. I know you because I collect vinyl. That's all I listen to.
Right.
I've seen, you were marketed. That was the listening medium. These records were cut. A lot of it was regional radio. You'd have some hits. But ultimately, you see the record, you see your face, you see who you played with, and you say, okay, he has an identity now. Mike Finnegan has an identity now. Brown Eagle, that was I got to him through Gradney, but Gradney through Little Feat. Everybody had now on YouTube, you got to seek because we're just saturated, man,
Yeah. But that's important. I think that technology is important. I think, all the things that are happening are important. It's just that what's more important is that the human feel. Let me tell you what I really, really want to let your listeners in on.
Hit it.
Okay. Music. Okay. For example, this album that I'm doing, which is called Bears Back. Okay. It's all about people's relationship with music. That's what it is. And anybody that listens to music, they listen to it for a variety of reasons. It's all about their particular relationship with a song. Or sometimes you say to yourself, I can't get that song out of my head. I can't move on to things because it's your relationship with that with that song. So, music has been around forever, since people were whistling, humming, banging on things, and it will continue to be around forever because it's a journey that one looks forward to taking. There are very, very few people that don't like music, but there are a lot of people that live with music as a part of their day. They'll listen in the car, they listen at work sometimes, when they're running. There's always something going on musically. I mean, you can be in the forest, the birds are singing. It's all about our relationship with music, and that's what I'm trying to do on this album. Is take the kind of songwriting and the kind of craft that I grew up on, that was real important to me. Intelligent lyrics, something that speaks to you, that moves you along, and come up with things that people are not hearing anymore.
Like what?
Brings it. Well, I don't hear records like by Cat Stevens anymore.
What about the Richie Havens
so
one? Like, what was the one that you were on with Havens, where you were playing the piano?
That was called Mixed Bag 2.
Is that something you don't hear? I would love you to break down the nuanced thing of what you don't hear. Or you can riff on Cat Stevens or Havens or whatever you want.
Well, you listen to, I mean, people want to hear, and may he rest in peace. I was crushed this week with the death of Walter Becker.
Big time.
Yeah. So if you look at a Steely Dan record,
my God,
and
Katie lied. Katie lied.
Right, and the way that they work, I have a couple of guys that played with Steely Dan that are playing on my album right now, the new one, and we talked. There's one track on my new album called Cab Calloway, and I'll give you an example of how we write. I was driving in L.A. I was downtown, and I saw a guy standing at a bus stop in a white suit, an older black man, probably in his 80s. And he was immaculately dressed, and he was holding in a brown paper bag, probably a beer. I don't know what was in it, but it was, a pop top. And I looked at this guy, and I was at the light. It was a long light, and I was thinking to myself, what an interesting man. I wonder what his story is. He's getting ready to get on the bus. So I went home that night, and I decided that he was a kid at the Cotton Club. This is where I go with things. He was a kid at the Cotton Club, maybe 10 or 12 years old, and he was dressed like Cab Calloway. And Cab Calloway was performing at the Cotton Club. That was a club up in Harlem for New York, for your listeners.
Yeah.
And as the band came off the stage, he would hand out the towels to everybody that was all sweaty and hot from the gig. And when Cab came down, he'd hand Cab his coffee or light his cigarette. And Cab says, "Thanks, Cece." And his name was Cece Jones. And they used to call him Little Cab Calloway Jones. So this guy grew up as Cab Calloway. And now he's in his 80s. Cab is gone, but it gives him a lot of sense of self, and it makes him comfortable. And when he closes his eyes at night to go to sleep, he becomes Cab Calloway, or he goes out dancing in this white suit as Cab Calloway. And so I turn around and write a song called Cab Calloway. I get some of the guys that played with Steely Dan on this because I put it in Walter Becker and Donald Fagen's wheelhouse. This is a song that they might have composed. So that's the journey that I take.
I thought it's so weird because you talked about this guy with a pop top and a paper set. I mean, my older daughter, and when I drive her to school in the morning, we've been listening to the Katie Lied album, and Daddy don't live in that New York City no more. He's drinking his dinner from a paper sack. I totally thought you were going in that direction. But no, that's I wanted you to talk. This is most of my show deals in the metaphysical as a modified trap set timekeeper. I'm not a professional musician. I'd like you to talk about, because in this country, music more than ever before, for a variety of reasons, it became sit and stare and watch the facility, sit and stare and watch the chops, or just receive the music, and it's supposed to be entertainment or pacification. The motherland of Africa, it is used as a language. It is used for transcendence. It is used for spirituality. And I'd like Richard T. Bear to talk about a time when you left your physical body on the bandstand.
Okay. There's two times I left my body on the bandstand.
Nice.
One was when artificially.
I dig.
Okay. And that was prior to 1983, when we all, artificially left our bodies. A lot, like in those days, I was playing with Steve Stills and his band, and Crosby, Stills, and Nash. I played keyboards on Southern Cross.
Oh my, dude! Oh, you are nailing it, dude. You are out of your mind. Okay, go ahead.
And those are the days when we were artificially leaving our bodies. And we'd go to good places, we'd go to bad places, we'd go any places, and that's the way we thought that this stuff was going to help us write great songs and help us perform. And in reality, the Peruvian marching dust just made our time faster and not quite as soulful. So
interesting. That's
So
interesting. That's interesting. I mean, you were sped up, and because I just want to tell you,
it was totally artificial, and it was a lot of waste of great talent and great records that could have been better records.
I don't know though. I know that David Crosby gets a bad rap at that time for being a total junkie, but that album, Daylight Again, it's my favorite Crosby, Stills, and Nash album by far. I mean, it has the great.
I was there when it was written. I was there when it was recorded.
Wow.
I was part of that.
Wow.
And
you're saying the artificiality of that transcendence, actually, the album could have even been better. You think?
I actually do.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's there. There are things that didn't get on that album for the reason that they didn't fit that particular batch of songs. That I thought there were some other ones that were really, really good that could have gotten on, that didn't make it for that reason. Okay, so that's prior to 83, and in 83, in February of 83, I decided I had to do something about what was going on. I was living in Laurel Canyon, and I was just isolating and just doing that Peruvian marching dust all the time, and decided I was going to stop. And it was not hip in those days to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a long time ago. And February 8th of this year, I will have been clean and sober for 35 years.
Mazel
and
tov
so,
to you. Wow.
Thank you.
Wow.
So from that moment on, I started to have to learn how to play like when I was 16 and 18 and 20 again. Naturally getting the high from what I was doing and leaving my body in a more natural way. It was very hard to accomplish that for about a year or two, because the anxiety of playing was difficult. But little by little, it started coming back. And I remember I helped start a thing called the Sober Musicians fundraiser and picnic. And every summer we'd have a picnic, and 5,000 people would show up.
Oh, the teetotaler picnic. Unbelievable.
Yeah, the musicians' picnic. And nobody would OD. There were never any fights, and we'd have performers like Eric Clapton and Dr. John and Chicago and on and on and on. Those kind of bands and those kind of people would come to play this picnic for free. And we never put it on radio or things like that. But the idea behind this was so that musicians and people could realize that they didn't have to artificially put things in and and play, so you could actually get up on stage and play. And I heard some great solos. I heard some great music for almost 22 years, and I was part of that on the board for 22 years. And that I left my body on many occasions looking out at 5 or 6 or 7,000 people that were having a great time and nobody ODing, and no fights. And
if you were gonna come, you had to be sober. I mean, as far as a musician,
no. The only requirement for that day is you didn't bring anything in.
Right.
And who knows? There were probably people that were loaded, but nobody was selling any booze. Nobody was selling any drugs. It was really for the sober community.
Can you just talk about the? This is so important because a lot of times I'll play my trap set or my electronic drum kit, and I won't plug it in. I'll just put on records like like Lee Sklar and Russ Kunkel records. Just try to play the groove, but
sure.
It's like I know that I just feel the music more when I smoke pot, and I say to myself, so when I'm there sober, I say that I'm not in a trance state as much, and I can't get in. Over time I can get in the music, but for somebody like yourself on the Persian march, can you talk about what specifically, what were the hardest mentally? What was the hardest thing to overcome to get to that point when you were definitely leaving your physical body in a totally authentic way?
The hardest thing?
Yeah.
The hardest thing was to be a musician, you've got to have an ego. And one of the hardest things is to focus on what you're doing at the time and not what's going on around you. And I've got nothing against anybody that smokes it or moves along in that on that journey. I mean, I'm just talking about me. I couldn't do it anymore because I was a pig and I used up my e-passes, my e-tickets, and so now what I try to do is I try to start that journey when I play live or I play in the studio. I just want the music to take me. I don't want to take the music.
So it is about managing your ego.
Yeah. It's check your ego at the door and be of service to the music.
So the second time you left authentically, can you talk about when you left your physical body?
Sure.
Yeah.
I can remember being over in Europe, for example, and playing places and playing songs that we would start a song and then get into a jam, so to speak, and that jam could go for 10 minutes. And you're thinking it was 3 minutes long.
Right. That's right. You're nailing it. You're nailing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a time thing. It's like You have no sense, when you leave your body, you have no sense of time, except the signature of the time of music. But in actual time, it's like, and if you do it right, neither does the audience.
Well, though, and that's you are very perceptive, because that was what I wanted to ask you. Is I want to get the Richard T. Baer concept. I know you weren't playing, odd metered Mahavishnu orchestra stuff, or African scale music like Bobby Hutcherson and Harold Land, but I do want you to. I want you to talk about your concept, the Richard T. Baer concept, that any note, when you get lost, when you leave the head of the tune and you go off into improv in a group setting,
right,
that any note can be the one. Because I see a lot of younger cats today, the rhythm set, they're always, I remember talking to Bernie Ledden's brother, Tom. I did an interview with Tom, and he was with James Jamerson in a band in the late 70s after he'd already moved out to LA. And he told him, Jamerson was telling him a story one time where they were in the studio and these guys were hemming and hawing. It was like, I don't know where the one is. Where's the one? And Jamerson's like, any note can be the one. Any note can be the one. And I just want you to riff on your what is your concept of any note can be the one?
Yeah. My concept is, for me, it starts with a guy like Tony Bronigal,
mm-hmm.
and him counting it off. We find we'll get a click going. we'll hear the time, and we'll go, let's move it from 86 to 82, or up to 96. And when the drummer says that's right, and it feels right to him, and then the bass player starts to play and puts it right where it's supposed to be, where there's no, it just sounds, it's the foundation. Then you build upon that. And if you build it, it will come. It's, music is like sex.
Yeah.
Very much like sex. And, there's a lot of foreplay involved. But then when you get into that groove, you just leave your body. It's the same thing. And that's why I think people love music so much.
Absolutely. And when it's a grind, then there's push and pull. It's not cool. But when you get into that groove,
that's right.
It's an orgasmic kind of.
It is. It's one of the places that music can take you is the same place, in a way that sex can take you. You kind of leave your body.
We're getting into. I mean, Richard T. Baer is just riffing. I mean, you. I wanted to ask you about. The other thing is the idea of, so what is your you believe that any note can be the one? I mean, essentially, you could be playing in 7, but the drummer might be playing in 4/4 time. It'll all come back around again. I mean, this is what I'm trying. What I'm trying to get at is this idea of like just not being obsessed with where the one is.
No, the one's always going to be there.
Yeah.
The pocket's always going to be there. It's where you can take it within the pocket and go back to the start of the start of the beat again, where it ends up. I mean, it's not. For some people, it's how many notes they can play in a short amount of time, and for others, it's where they put the notes in that short amount of time, and how those notes are blended together or separately or as a chord or as a solo that moves that particular track along. There are some amazing players, and I listen to what they're doing and I go, wow, I never thought of it that way. And that's because they have transcended, the basics.
Do you think that there's
some great
yeah.
there's some great young players.
No, I know there are, and this is what I wanted to ask you. I mean, you're out in Southern California. I'm just talking. I just look at it and I say, there's a supply and demand issue now. You guys were on the bandstand 6-7 nights a week, sometimes 3-4 weeks at a time. If you were touring, as Mike Finnegan would say, you might be playing upholstered sewers, but it was you were playing and you were getting comfortable playing with other peeps. And I look at people now and I say, why is there this emphasis on huge facility, monster chops? Look at me, look at me, look at me, and it's like because they don't know the next time they're going to be on the bandstand. And you didn't have that issue. That there wasn't that kind of anxiety. And I think that that's one of the issues now is I just don't you can just riff on it any way you want, but I'm just wondering how we got to this point in our society, with the exception of maybe New Orleans, or if you're Tower of Power, Journey, or Steve Miller Band, where if you're just regular cats, all of a sudden it's, oh yeah, you can play, but you got to pay to play, or you can play for the door. All of a sudden, I mean, Dizzy Gillespie maybe he wasn't a millionaire in a monetization point of view. He was treated like royalty because of the respect that he was doing.
Well, honestly, when I went to Germany, a long time ago, I'll give you an example.
I'm not talking about Europe. Europe is a totally different bag.
Paris.
Yeah,
but here's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There wasn't privatized radio.
Right.
There wasn't a privatized media. It was government run at that time. So people would tune in and listen to the 1 hour or 1.5 hours of music that they would get in the evening or whenever. And they had a respect, and this is all about respect. They had a respect for players when they would come over there, and they would, a guy that would not be looked at in the United States would go over to Paris or to Hamburg or Munich or Berlin, and the place, and it could be an upholstered sewer, like Finnegan says, but it would be packed with people, and they would drop on every note and listen to every single thing that the guy did. And there's very few places like that anymore, and it's all basically because people can't remove their phone from their hand and their eyes, and because of electronics, and because things are happening so quickly that nobody can focus without it's almost an addiction.
I agree.
An electronic addiction.
And I'm part of it. And how do you modulate? How do you guys deal with it as the gray beer? As you guys are the
you know what I would think would be great. I would think it would really be great if someone played a concert and made everybody check their phone at the door.
That would. Yeah, because I mean,
I expect Neil Young to do this one of these days. You want to come in? Sure.
Put it in the bag. Put
your phone in here. We'll give you a tag, and you pick up your phone on your way out. Instead of standing there looking at your phone and videoing something you should be listening to.
That's interesting. As a journalist, I went up to the Musical Instrument Museum in Scottsdale this weekend, and as a journalist, I love using the Facebook Live tool because
right.
I can chronicle. I mean, there was this raga going on with tablas and sarod. So I want to produce content on new media, and I don't want to just be staring at my phone. I think that's abhorrent. But does it? How do you guys? I mean, the one thing that's special about my program over the last 6 years is that you go back to bluegrass, it's Bill Monroe. You go back to R&B, it's Sam Cooke and Ray Charles. You go back to jazz.
Right.
Okay, so you guys either played with or interacted with on a consistent basis the original masters of the music, and I look at you guys as the torchbearers and the guys that are going to enlighten younger people when there is.
Well, here's the thing, and this is the reason why I made this record.
Yeah.
Because I want to carry the torch, on for the way that these records were made and the way that these songs were crafted for people that really want to be songwriters and want to be musicians right now, that want to get a bit of the old school and morph it and mash it up into, whatever the technology and the electronic technology is, Pro Tools, whatever. And kind of, it's important for us because everything's going to change, and I understand that.
Yeah.
Nothing's going to stay the same. Everything moves. But it's really important that, we still listen to Mozart and Bach, and Handel and Beethoven, and then we listen to, all the stuff that was on Chess Records and stuff coming out of Chicago. And that's why blues has made such a huge, huge comeback. I just wrote a song for a guy called Walter Trout. I don't know if you're familiar with Walter.
Maybe. Go ahead.
Okay, Walter Trout had the Blues Album of the Year last year. And now his new album called Duets is number 1 on the blues charts. And he is a great, great blues guitar player. He played with Canned Heat for a while and a bunch of other people. And I wrote a song for him with Charlie Musselwhite, a blues harmonica player.
Yeah, dude, I just interviewed Charlie. I just interviewed Charlie 2 weeks ago, and he told the greatest story about getting Orange Sunshine from the Mafia in Chicago. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. No, I mean, Musselwhite is Musselwhite also got paid. He got paid.
That's one of the that's one of the reasons why I had to stop.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, man. And also, by the way, for his first record for Vanguard, after all the taxes were taken out, he got a check from the union for 36 cents. I love Musselwhite. So anyway, go ahead. Trout.
I mean, so I love the cats that are still around that make that kind of amazing music, and that's why I can live with. I just got let me look over here. I'm looking at some checks I just got in. One is for 91 cents, 17 cents, 6 cents, $8.30. Hold on, one more.
$8.
And one for a penny. I've got them on my wall. I put them up the wall.
That is legend. That is.
Yeah. And
yeah.
We're not getting rich.
We're going to do set 2, Richard T. I do want to. My final question about this album is I've talked to Keltner 3 times. I've done interviews with Korchmar, Sklar, all the studio cats.
All right.
And it's not digital versus analog. It's how you mic the room. How did you mic? How did Brown Eagle, or how did you mic this session that you're coming out with?
Okay, you would want to talk to, and you should probably get him to do an interview with you. A fellow named Michael Dumas.
Wow.
And Michael Dumas, he did a lot of the Dwight Yoakam hits and things like that.
Sure.
And Michael is Robbie Krieger's partner.
Wow.
Yeah, and he has the studio Horse Latitudes. And I did the record there, and also with a guy called Johnny Lee Shell.
I've been looking for that's Gradney's Texas boy. I got to get to Johnny Lee Shell.
Yeah, Johnny Lee's playing on this record too.
Oh my God, this is a burner, dude. What it's called? Bear is Back.
Bear's Back. Yeah.
Bear's Back. Unreal. Go ahead. So the miking.
And it's where they're putting mics now, and the kind of mics they're using, to kind of things, and I was listening. Here's the thing, and I was a record producer for a while as well, and I've been kind of co-producing this with Bronigal, but I've left a lot of it up to Tony. What's happening now is, we're listening to these tracks that we've finished, and we're getting ready to mix them, and they almost sound mixed, because sonically they sound so good, and nothing's been put on them. We haven't had to, fix this with a little bit of highs or a little compression or this, that, and the other thing. Everything is kind of where it's supposed to be, and that's based upon the fact that Michael Dumas and Johnny Lee Shell record stuff so well that there's not a lot of fixes to be made.
Right. And so, but younger cats would feel like they would have to automatically.
I was just in a studio with a guy called J.J. Blair.
Uh-huh.
And he's a guitar player and a producer. And he had just had Nancy Wilson in his studio. The night before I was in there, she was recording. And I went in there with a friend of mine called Edgar Winter. and Edgar's playing on this record too. And
who's not?
Edgar,
who else? Who's not playing on this record?
That's why I can't finish this record, because someone said to Tony, said, when is Bear going to finish this record? We're up to like 20 songs now. And he says, I don't know, he keeps writing.
Well, and Brown Eagle, and listen,
he keeps writing songs. So I guess when he stops writing, we'll finish.
Well, I mean, this could turn into two CDs, right? I mean, it could turn into a double album.
It could, it's easily could be a double album, or it can be, volume 1, volume 2. I went in with Edgar Winter, and Edgar was going to play horn on this shuffle gospel thing that I wrote. And I said to JJ, I said, so what are you going to mic him with? And he opened his mic vault, and there's like a couple of $1 million in mics in this little vault. And he brings out some Neumanns and things like that are just pristine, like the day they were made, and they're 30, 40 years old. They could have been used at Capitol Records on Sinatra. And so it's how you're mic'd. Like we used a guy called Chuck Berghofer. Do you know who Chuck is?
Dude, are you Berghofer is still cooking? Is he playing upright?
Yeah, he's playing upright on the album. Yeah.
Dude, what is he, like 90 now? I mean, dude, he is not. He's
well into his 80s. He comes flying in, brings his upright, sets it up.
All I want to be there is with Larry Bunker and Chuck Berghofer. That's it. That's unbelievable.
Yeah. So this is why I did this record, so that I could play with these kind of cats in this kind of way.
Well, I mean, Richard T. Bear, I mean, this was a mind-melting interview. I really had a ball, man. Let's stay in touch. And
it's all about our relationship to music.
Yeah, no, but I did. I mean, you have a, there is a. It's very hard to describe music because it's a very emotional. It's a nonverbal thing, but you have a way of. You clearly have you have the chops to get around, not just musically, but to understand how real music is made. And even though this album might be taking a little bit long, Brown Eagle also has a book on shuffle drumming that it's been ages, and Dom Fumolaro is he beats him over the head every 6 months to get that thing out. So you're not the only one that's dragging on this, dude. Let's stay in touch, and let's do part 2 once the album, or anytime you want. I'd love to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're probably a couple of months away from the finish the mixing and mastering and all that. I just did a photo shoot for the cover, so we're getting close.
All right. Well, much love to you, man. And enjoy those 8-cent royalty checks, man.
It's crazy, man.
Dude,
it's crazy.
Great hang. And if you can connect me with Dumas, that would be great.
Yeah, I will.
All
I
right.
will give you his email address. I'll text it over to you. And also text me your email address, and I'll send you over a rough mix.
And also, I'll get you a copy of this. Send me a picture you want for the web post, but I'll be transcribing some stories, and I'll get you a copy of this later on today.
You got it.
Later on.
Enjoy.
Man.
Nice talking with your listeners.
Yeah, nice talking. Good to hear you, man.
Yeah. Can't wait to talk again.
All right. Keep it happening, Rich.
Ciao.
Later.